Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Everyone, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Jan Ohrstrom. Jan is a creator of the Valhalla Club, a former pro wrestler, and a Army veteran. And he has a pretty cool story. Wanted to bring him on, get him on the show, and talk a little bit about what he's been up to and how he's out there helping out veterans with the projects that he's been working on. So why don't I get out of the way, and Jan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into what you're up to.
Hey, Scott, thank you very much for having me on the show. It means a lot. I love doing stuff with other veterans. Yes, my name is Jan Ohrstrom, Army vet. Excuse me. It seems like I was in a long time ago. I was in from 02 to 06. I was with the 1st Infantry Division and stationed out of Germany. Went to Iraq for part of OIF2, and I was there for 13 months. Came home and like many, I had PTSD pretty bad from the experience out there, and really my life was going out of control until I was able to ground it and find some good mental health outlets, and which led to the creation of a documentary called the Valhalla Club, which can be seen right now on Amazon Prime, and it's a film about three Army combat veterans that use pro wrestling to deal with PTSD, and excuse me, it's been covered internationally, which is really cool. And when I'm not doing that, I'm a dad and I run a bourbon.
Awesome. Yeah. And so you definitely sound like you have your hands full with all the things you have going on. Let's talk a little bit more about the documentary, kind of what it's all about, where you got the idea from it, and kind of how that how that came to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got home, when I was in Iraq, I was a 50 cal machine gunner. Although I did not enlist as a infantry or any combat MOS, I was a mechanic. I got moved over there for the deployment, and in 04 in Beijing and Tikrit and all that, we were all over the place, and we saw some really gnarly stuff that messed with a lot of us. And when we came home, I, along with many, had a hard time adjusting to everything, and excuse me, and I turned to alcohol a lot, and before the service and after, I was a pro wrestler. That was my childhood dream, and I was doing pro wrestling the best I could, but I was drinking excessive amounts, and I was just not dealing with what I went through well. Combined with there was people that either stayed in or got out with me, but they started passing away. I lost a friend. He re-enlisted to go back to Iraq and unfortunately was killed. I had a couple of friends take their lives. I had a couple of friends that just had random motorcycle accidents, whatever. And when you have this unresolved war going on in your head, it just kind of throws gas on it. And and then on top of all that, I was not in a healthy relationship with a woman, and I'll throw all these things in a pot, and it ends up with me drinking 20 beers a night every night, and I was just not happy. And why that turns into Valhalla Club is I reached out to the VA, and I was hesitant at first, I'm not going to lie, because at first the VA just wanted to put me on pills, and I had a really big issue with that. There was a lot of, excuse me, for those who didn't follow like veteran issues from 05 to, say, about 12, there was a really big issue with VA overprescribing opiates and medications to veterans. And it led to a lot of either suicide by cop or accidental overdoses. And it was a terrible thing, absolutely unacceptable thing. And so I was really hesitant to do that. And then so it got to the point where I just wanted to go to therapy and talk to somebody and try to turn my life around. And it was starting to affect my relationship with my daughter. And I just had a newborn son. So, I'm trying to be a better man for them. So I started going to therapy with the VA, and we kind of centered on stuff that made me, happy. It was being creative and being a pro wrestler. So I started focusing on being the best pro wrestler I could. And a lot of people, I should say, I've been asked quite a bit. Well, how does pro wrestling, help you with this stuff? Well, pro wrestling is a different kind of athleticism, and you cannot. It's very hard, as they say, to be incredibly athletic in the ring when you're drinking all the time. So the drinking cut down to pretty much nothing. I had to eat healthy, and then rather than constantly let my thoughts control me, I was going to therapy, controlling my thoughts, and putting a lot of my mental effort and being a good dad and being the best pro wrestler, writing down, monologues for when I have to cut a promo or trying to build a business or sell shirts. Being creative with it and constructive. um, During this time, though, I met quite a few people that were telling me, my uncle was over there, my brother was over there, or I was over there. And it's nice to meet you. And they love the story of the war veteran coming back to pro wrestling and stuff. And I thought, looking at all this stuff, I'm like, there's a story here, and I think there's some way we can help some people who are suffering with their own mental health battles. And so I started outlining the Valhalla Club, but I didn't want it to be just about me. I wanted it to be about everybody. And so I sat on it for like a year and a half until I came across other people in the pro wrestling industry that also had been to combat and had similar stories. And so I went and I pitched this idea to them, and they agreed to do it. And next thing you know, we were covering different shows in Texas, filming us and our families and all that stuff, and giving a no nonsense take about what we went through and all of that. And then, the Valhalla Club was created. And I was very fortunate because our first show, when we aired the documentary in Waco, Texas, it sold out. And then we were getting covered by Univision and Sports Illustrated and Rolling Stone, Good Morning America, a whole bunch of places. Vice was another one, and it just helped spread this conversation about mental health, especially for veterans, that I think we as a country need to have. And I think we're getting better at it as a whole, but we got some progress to get made because it's just been an issue that's been neglected for so long. So we did a film, and we, like I said, we got a lot of exposure out of it, and now we're in the process of trying to make a feature full-length movie. If any of your fans have seen the movie The Wrestler, it's going to be kind of like that. It's going to be a drama. It's going to be an interesting take on readjustment and pro wrestling. We got the script submitted to a couple film festivals, and it's getting pretty positive responses. So hopefully that avenue opens up to actually, make the film. But it's been we released it in 2018, so it's been a 3-year run now. It's been a very interesting 3 years of interaction with people with similar stories and telling us what the documentary means to them, and even pointing people in the right direction who need help. It's been all very rewarding, and I'm very proud of what that film has done.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a key point there, the opening up this conversation about mental health. And one of the things that I like to do on this podcast is interview different guests who are doing different things, kind of creative, innovative things to help open up that conversation about mental health. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this show and talk about what you're doing with the Valhalla Club and everything else that you're doing is because in my mind, I never would have thought about wrestling as a an outlet for PTSD or anything like that. But for you, it was something that worked, and for a number of other veterans, it's something that works for you, and for a variety of reasons. And you touched on some of these, something being athletic, and if that's the thing that you want to do, you probably can't spend all night drinking and and doing the unhealthy things that a lot of people do to cope with the PTSD and everything else. So by talking to people like you, this opens up a whole nother world of possibilities to the veterans who are listening to this show and might be suffering maybe never even considered getting into wrestling, even though they may love it and they may want to do something like that, but they maybe never even considered it as a way to help themselves get out of that dark place that they might be sitting in right now. So, I think that this is like a perfect example of that creative, innovative approach to solving this problem, this mental health crisis that we face amongst veterans, and opening up this conversation. Like what is it that you're doing that maybe could be applied to some other athletic event, and how does that help other people? And I think that kind of conversation is something that we need to start having, and open up to these other possibilities that maybe aren't just throwing pills at a solution, or at a problem, or going and just sitting there talking to someone, because some people, quite frankly, are just not comfortable with the conversations that happen, and so other things like this wrestling and everything else, I think it's a perfect way to get involved with the different approaches to solving this mental health crisis. you know?
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have the Valhalla Club, and that's out there. You have this documentary that's out there, and the movie that's out there, and all of these things are they're really out there and helping out veterans. Um, you also mentioned the another the movie aspect of it. What goes into getting something like that, getting a script written and all that? Because I'm sure there's some people out there who, through the experiences that they've had, they might have a movie in them, but they maybe don't even realize that that's something that's a possibility. Recently I just released a book. Took me years to realize, hey, I have a book in me. I can put this out there, and maybe writing a book might be easier than putting a movie out there. But I'm almost positive that there's other veterans out there who, through their experiences and through the things that they've gone through, they might have a movie inside of them. So I'm interested to hear what the process is to go through, creating this movie. Everything from the script and the filming and all that kind of stuff. Like what is the process, and what was that like for you?
It was that's actually a very, very good question. It was a whole new process for me. And it was one that definitely took patience, and you can't rush something like this. You gotta, like, for me, I stand. There's one thing with me is I gotta stand by whatever I create. And so if it takes extra time to do it right by my standards, then I'll do it like that. And for anybody who's thinking about writing a script and stuff like that, you have your story element, but then you have all the supporting elements that go into it. And for us, like when I was writing this with Brad, who's the guy who produced the Valhalla Club documentary, the one of the hurdles I had was these secondary characters that were pushing the story along, because the story is based on true events, but it still has to get pushed along. And so these secondary characters in here, like, it's coming across, how are we going to do this right? Because you can't just have a standard dialogue of X, Y, and Z. Like, you have to give these characters life. And one thing that I have I guess a pet peeve about is when I see different movies about veterans of the military, and you can tell I did no research on this kind of stuff, and it's just one of those that makes me eye roll. So when I was doing this, I was like, okay, we got to make all this stuff not fake. We can't put these corny lines in there. We gotta have element and flavor into stuff. And I think for the Valhalla Club script, I think we did 4 or 5 rewrites of it to get it how we wanted, because every time when we did the rewrite, something else changed, and we're like, okay, this doesn't add up now. So we had to go back through and rewrite, and the whole script is 147 pages. So going back and over that multiple times, page by page, to make sure it all works is a little tedious at times. So what I would tell your listeners is if you have this story and you want to tell it, and I do believe there's people out there that it may not click to them yet, that they are sitting on an amazing story that should get written or published or movie or whatnot. But tell it to your standard. Like don't just do a rough draft. Like, all right, it's good enough. Like go back through and like, 'cause this is something that's going to represent you, and tell it. When you do that, though, now the interesting stuff begins, because when you start submitting it, people are going to want to give their own feedback. People are going to put their own twist on it, and then it's like then you have to have that creative control of like, what are you going to take these critiques into advice? Are you going to be willing to give up rights? And there's a whole different element now that starts coming into it. One of my big concerns with I've always been very protective of with the Valhalla Club in particular, is that I've never because I own the rights to it, I've never put it in a position where it can be spun politically. And because mental health and veterans, I feel it transcends. It's like Wu Tang and music; it transcends everything. Like this is not a right wing issue, a left wing issue. It's an American people issue, and then some. And so so when you're making a movie and stuff like that, the people who are producing are going to want to put their own spin on this and change stuff. And you just got to be prepared to like what you want, what you will accept, what you won't, and the cost of doing that. Um, one of the things with Valhalla Club is that we were very clear to that. We made it about the veterans because it's the men and women who go out there. We don't take shots at any side. It's just seriously about the veterans and those affiliated with the veterans that see the changes, that see them trying to deal with stuff, and veteran other people who have experienced it and get it, and other people who don't have experienced it and are trying to get it, and other people who don't experience it and just don't get it. We hit those elements because that's what we feel is vital. So for your listeners who are writing, just stand by what your values are with it, and write it and to give your steel approval, and then be prepared to defend it, or at the very least know what you're willing to compromise on if you want to get this story out there. But then go forward and have fun.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key is having fun with it. Enjoy the process and go through it. But you're right. When other people start reading through your script or your manuscript or whatever it is that you're putting out there, they're going to offer their feedback and their opinions and whatnot on that. But sometimes that stuff is good. It's positive to get those kind of feedback, because they might have made that mistake before. And just like anything else that you've done in life, if you look to the people who are more experienced, they may be able to offer you some advice that will help you out along your way and make life that much easier, or allow your script to be able to be picked up by somebody, or whatever the case may be there. But like you said, also know what you're willing to compromise on, because there's some things that I've watched plenty of military movies that are just so cringy with the way they talk and things like that.
Right.
If you're not willing to compromise on that stuff, just know that and say that up front. It's like, hey, look, this is not how we talk, and that's not how this movie is going to go. We're going to keep it the way I want it, or it's just going to be a no go. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Keeping that integrity of what you want it to be makes a whole lot of sense too. Um, but yeah, I mean, all of this, goes back to that conversation, and the more people who are putting out their story and opening up the world to what we've experienced, whether it's in combat or in our military service or even just our day-to-day lives, it helps the general public to understand what it is that's going on in the minds of these service members or veterans who are struggling with mental health. And that's part of the reason why I wrote my story in my book. And I feel like it's gotten a lot of good positive attention as well. That just like you were saying that yours has gotten some great feedback as well. But I think it's opening up eyes to what's going on in the military community, and that's an important thing to do. I think just educating the public so that we are aware of what's going on in the military community.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. May I ask your book? How many pages is it?
It's just over 200 pages, like 206 or something like that.
Did you feel when you were writing yours, did you feel like you could have fit more of the story in? Did you feel like that was a good stopping point, or did you feel like this is part one of the next step?
It's funny. I had that similar question asked of me a few weeks ago, and the book is a part of my life, right? And clearly my life is still ongoing, and so I feel like there always could be another chapter that could be added. And I had to just take a look at it and say, okay, here's where I cut it off. And I
Yeah.
say, okay, this is what this book is about. And I had to define the scope of what the book was going to be about. And so that way I didn't end up having a story that went on until I'm 65 years old, or whatever. And I just keep adding and adding and adding to the story, because I could certainly do that, and I'd end up with a 800-page book or whatever that no one's going to read through the whole thing, because some of it may just not be all that interesting. But I didn't necessarily have a page number in mind when I started writing it and saying, okay, I need to have at least 200 pages, or I need to have, whatever. I just knew, okay, this is the story I want to tell. This is how I want to tell it. And, the only reason why I got over those 200 pages is because at the very end, as I was about to release the book, the book that I wrote had to do with Afghanistan and my experiences over there, and I decided to add a little bit of information, my thoughts on the current situation that was going on in Afghanistan with the withdrawal and everything like that. So,
Okay.
so I did add a little bit. It still stayed within the scope of the book because it had to do with Afghanistan and the situation over there, because I did talk about the situation while I was over there and everything. So it wasn't like I strayed from that. But I didn't feel like I needed to have a certain predefined length for the book or anything like that. It was really just a matter of getting the story out there that I wanted to have told, and perhaps I could have added more stories to it. There's other things that maybe happened, and so every once in a while someone will bring up something. It's like, oh yeah, you remember that this happened back in that time, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe I could have added that to the book. But it is what it is, and I'm happy with how it came out and what was included in it. And I think that's kind of important, because it's my story from my perspective. It's not that other person's story from their perspective. And if they want to write a book, they're more than welcome to do that.
That quote, actually, that is probably, I mean, that you just knocked out of the park. It's your story to be told. And because there's probably some people out there, I know there is for a fact, 'cause I've met these people. They're like, well, I didn't do anything in Iraq. Or they're like, well, these people already wrote about Iraq. Why should I write about Iraq? Well,
Right.
That's their story about Iraq. That's their thing. You aren't them.
Right.
You could end up starting to write stuff down, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I forgot about this. And next thing you know, you have this brilliant memoir experience that you're like, oh shit, I have something, and you can put it out there, and it can touch somebody's life. But that's the thing, is that you just said it, don't shortcut yourself. Other people have their own stories, but you have your story, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely worth creating your own story and putting that out there. You never know what's going to happen with it.
Yeah, and I've said this before too to other people, but when you take a look back at previous generations, or the other wars that have been fought, the World War I and Civil War, and previous wars all the way back through our country's history, and you look at the stories that came out from there, you had very few, or if any, privates writing a book, or about their experiences, because it was just so cost prohibitive back then to be able to do that. And a lot of them, they didn't have access to writing these stories. And there were no movies back then, and so they had no scripts to write or things like that. So it was very hard for someone to tell their story other than verbally, and just telling it to their family or their friends or whoever. And so then their story only lived in the minds of the people that it was told to, and it died with them, just as it did with the original person who told the story. And
Right.
so there's a lot of missing pieces to the story of, let's say, the Civil War or World War One, or whatever. There's a lot of missing pieces, because there are so many individual people who fought in those wars who maybe just never told their story. And so now this day and age, I mean, if you have a computer, you can write a book. Like it's not that hard to do that. And even if you don't have a computer, you can go to a library or something like that, and you can write a book there, and you can do it all on there. And it's so much easier now than it ever was before. You don't need to go through the traditional publishing. You can self-publish your book, and you can have a great-looking book with great copy and everything like that for little to no money out of pocket. And so there's people who are veterans of these more recent wars who have stories in them, as simple as they might be. Even if you didn't see combat, you still went to go do something for your country. Talk about your story, and that helps give a better picture. And it's one more piece to the big overall puzzle of what happened over there. And when we have everybody's perspectives, laid out, then we get a better idea of what it was that actually happened over there.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, for sure. So you also have, you mentioned at the beginning, you talked about the bourbon company that you have as well. Talk a little bit about that. How did you get into that, and what's that all about?
Yeah. So let's see here. The bourbon came from a side business of mine. As I mentioned, I like being creative, and one of the things I did for a while, just as a hobby, small business stuff, was I was creating and designing t-shirts. And one of my designs caught the attention of a distiller, and we were talking about stuff, and I had made a comment that I've always found distilling fascinating, and the whole whiskey bourbon business. And long story short, that led to a lot of talks about going in together and doing a collaboration on a bourbon. And when we got it going, and I was kind of thinking about how I wanted to approach this, much in a similar vein of Valhalla Club, I wanted it to be something on a positive note. And so as I was thinking about everything, I was thinking about, like, imagine a man or woman enjoying an evening of achievement. You got the promotion that you didn't think you were going to get, or you won the game where people said you were going to lose, or whatever. And I went down the rabbit hole in this because it hit me on a personal note, because so many times in my life when I was doing something, to include enlisting in the Army, I was always told that I couldn't do it. I was told I wouldn't last 4 weeks in the Army. I was told that, Valhalla Club wouldn't take off. I was told being a pro wrestler is stupid. And all this stuff, when I succeeded at it, it made me kind of, like, not only really proud of myself for going through that, but it's like something to celebrate from. So, me being a Viking and then taking all this stuff into consideration, I was like, well, they say when you win, when you have victory, the best thing to do is drink the blood of your enemies. So I was like, that's it. That's going to be the name of the bourbon. And then we went with that, and we started moving forward with it. And I considered a victory bourbon. In fact, on the bottle itself, I give a little positive note to the customers here, and I say, think about how far you've come, how many people said you'd fail, long hours, the grind, the sacrifice, and now you're breaking records, smashing goals, chasing dreams, fight forever. And it's just, I want this bourbon, when somebody does something crazy cool in their life, especially in the face of adversity, that, they're having a drink and reflecting, and they're drinking my bourbon, and proud of themselves, because I know I am. I root for people to succeed, and it drives me up the wall when I see people try to hold other people back.
Yeah.
So, we got that going about 2 years ago, and we were only in the state of Texas for a long time until 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we signed a deal with Speakeasy, and so now we're carried in 26 states that you can buy online through our website, bloodofmyenemiesbourbon.com. And if you're one of the 26, you can order it, and they'll ship it to you, and you can enjoy it for yourself. It's a nice little bourbon. I tell people who are not too familiar with bourbons and whiskeys that if you like bullet bourbon, it's in that same palate. It's pretty smooth, and it's not anything crazy. It's just a good bourbon to drink and enjoy. So
Excellent. Well, that sounds wonderful, and I'm hoping that I'm in one of those 26 states, because if I am, I will be getting myself a bottle of that bourbon to enjoy, as I'm looking at the victory of releasing this first book, which I know took so much effort to do, and I the way you described it feels like I need to celebrate it a little bit. So this definitely will be something I'll be looking into. But we will have links to everything that we talked about today. Um, your bourbon, your the Valhalla Club, and everything else that we talked about. I'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Anything else that you wanted to add as far as places people can go to get in touch with you for any of the stuff that we talked about, or websites, social media, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do though, question. So, and I agree with you. You should be celebrating your book. The book is a big achievement. But let me ask you this: uh, if I pick it up, will that come from you or from a warehouse? Because I'd like to get it autographed.
Well, so I actually have two options for getting the book. You can go to Amazon just like anybody else and buy a copy of the book there. The book is called Surviving Son. You just search for that. You can get it there. Those are not autographed on Amazon because it's all print on demand through Amazon, and so they'll print it, ship it out directly. But if you go to survivingsonbook.com, you can order an autographed copy, and I will sign it to whoever you want it to. If it's a gift for somebody or if it's for yourself, you just let me know who you want it to be signed to, and I'll do that, and I'll get a copy out to whoever. Um, so yeah, survivingsonbook.com, and there's also links there to Amazon if that's just easier to remember. So you can go check that out and grab a copy from there.
Awesome. I am absolutely going to do that. I love supporting stuff like this. Um,
Excellent.
yeah. So if anybody needs to get a hold of me, you can go on Facebook or Instagram and find the Valhalla Club. Or if you are a fan of the bourbon and whiskeys, you can find Blood of My Enemies Bourbon on both Facebook and Instagram. And as a closing, I tell people this quite a bit, like people who are still on the fence about taking that jump or whatever for their mental health, because let's be real, it is an uphill climb, it is a battle. It's not a night and day thing. You have to really apply yourself, have some self-discipline, and all the while underlining that you are a good person. There's people out there that love and support you, and all this is going to be okay in the end. But I tell people, one thing I've learned, of the many lessons I learned by doing stuff the wrong way, but like 10 seconds of insanity can literally change your life. When I was in Iraq in '04, WWE was doing their tribute to the troops, and they came through my base. And, as I was talking to them, I get in my head, I was like, you know what? Just pitch yourself to them. Maybe they'll give you a shot, whatever. And in 10 seconds, I went up to one guy. I introduced myself. I said I was a pro wrestler. I joined the Army. After the military, I'm going back to pro wrestling. Can I please talk to somebody about getting an opportunity with your company? And long story short, the person I was talking to was a person under Vince McMahon, the guy who owns WWE. So it was a pretty high up executive.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked for like 45 minutes after that. And then he gave me his cell phone number and he goes, look, I will give you a tryout and we'll see how it goes. And, cut to a year later when I'm out of service, that I'm backstage on Monday Night Raw, like standing next to Vince McMahon, looking through the curtain of 39,000 people out in an arena. And this is something that 4-year-old Jan, watching Hulk Hogan and Dusty Rhodes, could not even fathom that he would be doing one day. And all of
Right.
that happened because I was just like, fuck it, 10 seconds of insanity, just put yourself out there and go for it. And you never know what could happen. So people who are on the fence about writing that book, or want to get into some kind of hobby like woodworking, painting, whatever, like just do it. Just make that decision and do it, because you never know what doors it'll open because of it. And your life will most likely be better by investing in yourself, by doing something like that. So those 10 seconds of insanity can really change your life, and that was what I tell people all the time. Go for it.
Yeah, definitely go for it. 10 seconds of just putting yourself out there and trying to get in touch with the right person. You never know what could come of it. Jan, thank you very much for coming on the show, sharing your story and what you're up to, helping out veterans. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for your time and keep doing what you're doing, because I think it's a lot of great work.
Well, thank you for having me. It is honestly a great honor, and I'm very humbled by this opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Drive On Podcast.